Hi there, I'm Victoria Peat, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a simple 4-patch block using the one at a time method. This method is ideal if you are just looking to make the one 4-patch block, or if you're making one from 4 different colours, or you just like the satisfaction of seeing your quilt blocks come together one at a time. So for this simple 4-patch block, I'm going to be using 2 separate colours. I'm going to be using a white and a dark pink with spots on it, just to have a nice contrast. The finished size I'm planning to make is 8 inches. I therefore have cut my squares at 4.5 inches each. And because I'm making one at a time, I need to make 2 pairs exactly the same. I'm going to join them together, and then I'm going to flip one of the pairs round, and we're going to sew those together. So we place those in pairs with right sides together. And then at my sewing machine, I have myself set up with a 1/4 inch foot on my machine, and I have my needle in the correct position so that I am sewing an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm just going to run these through. And I'm going to chain piece, which means that I'm not going to cut my threads between this pair and this pair. I'm just stopping with the needle down, making sure this pair are nicely aligned, and then I'm going to feed those underneath the presser foot. And the little teeth on the feed dogs underneath here, they're going to grab the fabric and pull it through. Chain piecing is really useful to do if you're sewing lots and lots, because it just cuts down on the repeated processes between stopping and cutting threads, moving to and fro the machine. It just speeds things up a little bit. So if you have chain pieced, then you just need to take these apart. Now for your 4-patch, your simple 4-patch, I'm going to press both of my units in exactly the same direction. So I'm going to press towards the darker fabric. So I have that one on top. I pressed it flat, and then I'm pressing away. And I'll repeat with the same process with the other pair. I'll press flat and then away. Allow those to cool a little bit. If you allow your fibres to cool, they will just set in the right place, because you've got to remember, when the fibres are warm, they're loose and they have a tendency to move about. So we now have our 2 pairs, and we're going to flip one of these around. And because we have pressed our seam allowances in the same direction, we now have one seam allowance going this way and one seam allowance going this way. What that allows us to do is then place these right sides together, and these seam allowance will just nest on top of each other nicely. So they'll sit nice and snug, one seam allowance going one way and one going the other way. And by just matching these up here, it will mean that you've got the best chance possible of having these four squares meeting nicely in the middle. So again, we go back over to our machine, still with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can pin if you like, but you don't have to. Just making sure as you go that you've still got these seam allowances nested and your raw edges are matching. If you've got this little seam allowance here facing towards the machine, as it comes up to the press foot, just make sure that that tucks in and doesn't accidentally fold back on itself. Then we can give this a press again. Now at this stage, you've got a couple of options. You can press this seam open. So once you've pressed it flat, you can then press these open to spread either way. You can press all up or all down, although it doesn't really matter because we've got a symmetrical block. Or what you can do is you can swirl that seam allowance here, because you've got 4 different fabrics and you've got all these seam allowances. The middle can get a little bit bulky. So what you can do is you press one side up and one side down, and you'll just see here in the middle there's a couple of little stitches that you can just pull apart ever so gently, and that creates like a little four patch, mini four patch in the middle. Sometimes the back of your seam ripper helps just to loosen some of those threads. There's no need to actually cut them, but if you just slide those stitches through. A little bit more challenging when your eyesight's getting dodgy like mine. So you're pressing one down and the next one up. And if you look at the seams in your block, they're almost all going in the same direction, clockwise. Press that little four patch down, and then from the right side you can give that a press. Allow that to cool. And there you have a lovely four patch where your seams are all nice and flat, and this middle section here is not too bulky. So that is your classic four patch block using two fabrics, and this particular one used 4.5 inch squares to create a finished 8-inch block. So this will measure 8.5 inches across here, but when it is sewn into your final project, it will measure 8 inches.